Hello students, I am here today to teach you on the topic planning, one of the major functions of management in food service organization. Today's presentation of mine will have a brief introduction on planning in food service, the objectives, definition, the major steps in the process of planning, and of course a summary of what we have learned. To start with, let me tell you students that the food service industry is currently experiencing a great challenge in satisfying its customers' demand. Globalization, economic reforms, westernization, and advent of information technology has resulted in greater expectations from the customer in terms of quality, variety, safety, and a wholesome food. The organizational success of any food service industry solely rely on meticulous planning. Planning is the process of mapping the course of actions to be done in advance. Planning is essential at all levels of administration in a food service operation. Depending on the nature of tasks to be accomplished, planning can be either short-term or long-term. It is well accepted fact that planning is a mental exercise and involves vision for futuristic growth. With this prelude, the current module will make you to gain knowledge on the process of planning in food service operation, understand their importance in success of organization. Planning can be defined as a mapping of course of action in advance to carry out a job or a task. Planning is a continuous process that is carried out at all levels. To put it simply, it refers to knowing what to do, why to do, how to do, and when to do, and where to do, by whom. Though planning literally implies futuristic activities, it is always done based on the past experience or performance of an institution. To give you an example, suppose I want to add paneer Manchurian in the menu list of my hotel. I should consider the popularity of paneer Manchurian, its demand, and the profit it generates in the similar hotels in the past. Remember that planning is crucial for all jobs and is needed at all levels, irrespective of the nature of job, for the successful functioning of any food service operation. I hope so far you would have got a gist of what planning is all about, isn't it? Can we now move on to the process of planning? As all of us know, planning depends on the nature of food service environment. The scope and the nature of planning varies. Greater the market risk and fluctuation in a food service, more will be the planning needs. Recently, food service institutions have started using computer softwares and mathematical modules for effective planning. However, there is no standard templates for planning process due to its variation in size of hotels, types of food service, customized working environment, and work culture. Therefore, every food service institution should meticulously develop their own planning process. Students, be it any food service institution, the process of planning is carried out in 9 steps. They are identification of opportunities and problems, information search or knowledge hunt, goal setting or target fixing, analysis of planning opportunities or limitations, constructions and evaluation of action plan, weighment of alternative course of action plan, selection of the best action plan, determination of secondary plans, and of course, provision for future expansion. Let us now understand the first and foremost process of planning, the identification of opportunities and problems. Before we start with any work, we need to identify our own strength and weakness, isn't it? Yeah. Similarly, we need to identify the opportunities and the problems of a food service institution prior to the planning. Since it is determined by a number of factors, the smooth functioning of a food service industry or a hotel is always challenged by a number of limitations and opportunities. Though limitations puts a constraint in achieving organizational goal, at the same time, it also creates new platform to explore and adopt new technologies and strategies for the growth of the organization. Students, remember that a food service industry as such has a number of barriers. To name a few, the financial rules and regulations, cultural disparities, variation in food habits, fluctuation in the market price, technological advancements, and customers' perception and preferences are always considered as influencing factors which needs a detailed planning. The very first reason to identify the challenges and the problem is to make the food service industry understand its environment. Planning must help the organization to adapt to its environment. Hence, it demands a good skill from the food service manager to understand and analyze every opportunity and translate them into prospective business idea. Let me make it simple for you with an example. Imagine that you are asked to arrange a lunch for 500 guests. Will you not consider the following before organizing the lunch? The available space for serving lunch, the food cost, the type of guest that you are going to serve, their food likes and dislikes, availability of food and labor cost, and the budget allotted to you. Here, the space, budget, and the labor may be considered as your strength or opportunities. And the types of guests, their likes and dislikes are the challenges or problems that you need to take care while satisfying their needs. Knowledge hunt is an extensive search for information. Food service personnel try to collect as much as information as possible before doing any work. Thus, a knowledge hunt on basic rules and regulations of hospitality industry, policies on building standards, availability of resources, funding agencies and their funding policies, manpower requirements, food service methods, size of clienteles, and volume of business is carried out as a primitive step for planning. The information gathered enables the food service personnel to make smart choice on course of actions to be taken. I hope now you will agree with me that a food service manager can plan up his activities effectively only with appropriate and valid information. In the process to seek relevant information, a food service manager normally looks for two sources of information, namely the external and the internal sources. As the name suggests, external sources includes information obtained from sources other than food service organizations like print media, which includes newspapers, magazines, journals, and etc. Professional bodies, academic institutions, and customers also forms the source of information. Information obtained within the organizations like the annual report, informal monitoring, review meetings, and suggestions from superior and subordinates are the internal source of information. Once the source of information is identified, the food service manager initially collects the information either by mere observation or through informal monitoring. Secondly, he seeks information from authentic sources such as journals, books, annual reports, and hoteliers meet. And thirdly, the hotel steps up an information center or an information bureau to collect and store all relevant details for the smooth functioning of the hotel. The collected informations are then analyzed for the cause and effect relationship using correlation or regression analysis. It's like this. You can analyze a relationship between the customer demand and the sales volume, the food cost and the quality of the food, or the amount of money spent on labor and the profit margin. Remember that the knowledge hunt will help the organization to clearly identify its goal or the targets. So what next? The next step in planning is goal setting or target fixing. A good knowledge hunt will make a food service industry to clearly set its goals or the targets. Goals are the results that a hotel or a food service industry desire to achieve on a long run within its limitations. Besides having a common goal of providing food and accommodation to satisfy a customer, each department in the hotel will have its own specific goals. Example, the goal of a front office department is to sell the room, whereas the goal of a housekeeping department is to take care of the room and the guest. In general, hotel aims for a consistent growth with high profit margin and sustainable market. For a successful operation of a hotel or a food service industry, mere goal setting may not be sufficient. It is very important for the food service personnel to fix targets clearly, and it has to be substantiated with relevant strategic plans and policies to achieve the organizational goal to the fullest. For example, if the hotel wishes to improve its occupancy rate, then it should accordingly set a cost-friendly pricing policy. Similarly, if it wants to attract more customers, it should develop novel, healthy recipes, recruit and train qualified chefs, isn't it? Only then it can fully achieve its goal or targets. Be it any kind of business, target fixing is of three types. They are short-term targets, medium-term targets, and long-term targets. Short-term targets is the one that is fixed for a shorter duration of time, say from 6 months to a year. As food is highly perishable and its cost keeps fluctuating, it is always advisable to set more short-term targets in a food service operation. Do you want to have an idea about some of the short-term targets? Looking at the figure, you can see that menu planning, prediction of customers' turn-in and turn-out, staffing requirements, and sales of food and beverages are some of the short-term targets. This is because a customer will get bored if the same menu is sold for 4 or 5 years, isn't it? Hence, it must be planned for a shorter duration. Also, we cannot expect the same number of customers turn in and turn out since it depends on many factors. Based on the customer and the change in menu, the staffing requirement will naturally vary, isn't it? Hence, targets for the above factors can be set only for a shorter duration. Targets that are fixed for a duration of 1 to 5 years are called medium-term targets. Some of the examples are methods of purchasing, quality standards, gross sales, purchase of portable equipments, financial requirements, and sales promotions. And the last kind of target is a long-term targets. Targets that are set for a period of 5 to 10 years are called as long-term targets. As you see, some of the long-term targets are capital investment, that is, investment made on infrastructure and equipments, personnel policies, profit margin, and marketing policies. Since decision making on infrastructure and purchase of equipments demand a very high investment, it requires a long-term planning. Students, always keep in mind that a food service institution will have to do all the three types of target fixing for its successful growth. On the whole, fixing a target for a food service institution should be specific, measurable, attainable, rewarding, and timed. Once the food service manager is clear about this target, he needs to move on to the next step, the determination of planning premises and their limitations. Though internal uncertainties can be well tackled according to the external environment needs, since they are within the organization, it is always difficult to manage the uncertainties in the external environment, such as the financial policies of the government, economic fluctuation, changing customers' trends, potential market competitors, and availability of competent workforce. A food service manager cannot always make an accurate forecast of external environment. Therefore, determination of planning premises or limitation has to be based on certain perceptions. Perceptions can be made on market behavior with special reference to demand and product supply, food cost, labor and overhead charges and its corresponding selling prices, anticipated sales volume, marketing and sales promotion strategies of competitors, upgradation of technology, financial policies of the government, population explosion, and so on. One should always keep in mind that it is not mandatory to make predictions on all the above factors. Factors which hampers the functioning of food service organization very badly, like the financial policies and customers' preferences, should be identified and scrutinized critically. Remember that optimistic and realistic perception always results in healthy management approach. Students, just to recapitulate, so far we have learned 4 steps in planning, namely the identification of opportunities or problems, information search or knowledge hunt, goal settings or target fixing, and determination of planning opportunities and their limitation. Yeah, you're right. The 5th step in planning is construction and evaluation of action plans. Action plans are nothing but performance of job-specific work to achieve the set targets. Not one action plan is enough to direct a food service organization to realize its targets or goal. An organization usually have a multiple plan of actions to achieve a common goal. For a better understanding, let us consider this example. To increase the volume of sales in a restaurant, a food production manager can increase the variety in the menu, or he can reduce the price of the dish, or he can organize a food mela, or he can develop and introduce mouth-watering novel recipes in his restaurant. You will agree with me that to increase the sales volume, the food service manager can actually adopt 5 different action plans, isn't it? Sometimes a food service manager may not use multiple action plans, but will settle down with 1 or 2 action plans. For example, storage of a non-perishable food which requires only 1 action plan of storing the food in the container. That's it. As a food service manager, it is always wise to evaluate all the action plan and to choose the one that suits the organizational goal. For every task to be complete in a hotel, there may be many alternative course of action plans, but all of them may not be equally suitable or practicable. Each alternative plan has its own point of strength and weakness. A proper evaluation of the alternative action plan is necessary to determine which of them would be the ideal. Evaluation of each alternative action plan will have to be from different points of view, namely its effectiveness in contributing to the accomplishment of the organizational objectives, its ability to withstand the effect of environmental changes, its correlation and adaptability with ongoing action plans. To evaluate the increase in service facilities, the food service manager should take into account the factors such as the suitability of the organization to introduce any new services. I'm sure you will agree with me that inclusion of a spa or a gym may not be suitable one for a hotel with no accommodation service or the one with restricted accommodation service, whereas it holds good for a property with more than 100 rooms, isn't it? Sales potential of a new service facilities introduced. How is the new service facility, the spa or the gym, going to be different from the other spa and the gym already in the market? The type of customers who are actually going to use it and their spending powers and so on. The action plan to increase the number of rooms will have to be evaluated in terms of the likely cost and benefits. Accordingly, each alternatives should be subjected to a close examination to determine its suitability. In conditions where objectives are short-term and availability of funds and labor is not a problem, and the behavior of the other relevant factors is also easy to determine, evaluation of different alternatives does not pose any problem. But remember, planning goes deeper into the future forecasting. Evaluation of alternatives becomes more and more difficult, though various statistical and mathematical methods may prove to be useful in such a case. A degree of uncertainty will still remain. Are you now clear with the evaluation of alternate action plans? Can we now pass on to the seventh step of planning process, selection of best course of action? Whether the evaluation of various alternatives is directed by individual preferences and prejudice, or it's based on mathematical and statistical techniques, a decision has to be taken in favor of one or the other course of action plan. Needless to say, the plan of action ultimately chosen should be the one that is the optimum or the best under any circumstances. It should be flexible and cost effective at the same time. Once your basic plan of action is decided, it's always wise to have supportive plans also. Yes, you're right, the eighth step in planning process is determination of secondary plans. Secondary plans are derived from the basic plans. They are meant to support and exhibit the achievement of the basic plan. For example, once the basic production plan is decided upon, a number of secondary plans dealing with purchase of raw materials, consumables, stores, acquisitions of necessary ingredients and equipments, hiring and training of workers, etc., would have to be prepared to facilitate execution of the basic plan. Students, I hope you're clear with the secondary plans, and can we now move on to the final step in the process of planning, that is the provision for future expansion. Planning is with a view of achieving certain predetermined objectives. To ascertain if plans selected for the purpose are proceeding along right line, it is necessary to devise a system for continuous evaluation and appraisal of the plan. This will help in identifying any shortcoming so as to initiate suitable corrective actions in time. Students, to summarize, so far we have learned what planning is all about and the 9 steps in the process of planning. Remember that a good planning must always help the institution in effective time management, identify futuristic challenges and scope for improvement, should enhance better work efficiency since the objective and the organizational goals are clearly specified and communicated, and must eliminate confusion or ambiguity and should serve as a guideline for the overall smooth functioning of an organization.